What do you know about Handan Sultan? She was a consort of Ottoman Sultan Mehmed III and mother and Valide Sultan to their son Sultan Ahmed I. She was one of the prominent women during the era known as the Sultanate of Women. Handan may have been born around 1570 in nowadays Bosnia. In the end, she found herself in the household of Sultan Selim's daughter, Geverhan. Geverhan and her husband Chera Mehmed Pasha noticed her beauty, so they paid special attention to her education. Their undisguised purpose may have been to give her to the heir to the throne as soon as possible. Gifts of this kind were very common among members of the political elite, for if the concubine was to the liking of the future sultan, the woman could later easily help her former protege as soon as she came into power. This is how Handan became a member of the future Mehmed's harem after his circumcision ceremony in 1582. The prince did not leave the capital immediately, only in December 1583. Then they made their way to the province of Manisa to begin their independent life there. The trip to Manisa really exhausted everyone, as the extreme winter weather made their journey very long and difficult. Certainly Handan didn't particularly enjoy the journey, which lasted more than a month, but she certainly waited with high hopes for them to finally arrive. Handan and Mehmed's relationship was finally fulfilled in Manisa. In February 1585, Mehmed had his first child, Prince Selim. Most historians agree that the boy was born to Handan. He was followed by other children, so Handan had at least one daughter, Aishi, and two sons. Prince Suleiman was born around 1586 and died as a child. Ahmed was born in 1590 as Handan's youngest child. Handan was certainly Mehmed's favorite at first, but over time the ruler turned to another concubine, Halime. This is indicated at least by the fact that Handan probably had no more children after Ahmed, while Halime did. Mehmed ascended the throne in 1595, and Handan's life changed in one fell swoop. Following the new sultan, she traveled with her children to Istanbul, where she found herself in the imperial harem, which was under the control of Valide Sultan. Safiya was not present in Mehmed's Manisa province, but there were gossips about her strong will in the Manisa harem surely. Arriving in Istanbul, the first few years were relatively calm, as the chief eunuch, Gazanfer Aga, kept order in the harem, so Handan spent all her time with her children. She was also able to get close again to Handan Sultan, who had gifted her to Mehmed previously. Handan was well acquainted with the political elite, Safiye, and the Sultan, so she certainly provided useful advice to her former slave. Perhaps the relationship between Safiye and Handan was relatively balanced due to Handan's help. An epidemic devastated the capital in 1597, killing Handan's eldest son, Selim, but it cannot be ruled out that Suleiman also died at that time. In addition to mourning, Handan also had to face the fact that it was no longer her son who was the eldest prince, but the son of her rival, Halime, Mahmud. Handan would have done anything to keep her only son, Ahmed, alive, so she allied with Safiye. Safiye and Halime hated each other in particular, and it was no different between Mahmud and Safiye. As the soldiers and commoners were very fond of Mahmud, Handan began to spread rumors about the prince being impotent, so his reign would not bring a fruitful future for the empire. In addition, with the help of Safiye, and probably Geverhan, they tried to bring as many statesmen as possible to the side of Prince Ahmed. For Handan, it was ultimately Safiye who won the war. Safiye successfully obtained a letter sent to Halime by a seer. The letter revealed that Halime wanted her son to sit on this throne after the Sultan's death. Of course, the letter was not the only sin of Halime and Mahmud. For months, both Halime and Mahmud tried to convince the Sultan to finally send Mahmud to a province, and Mahmud had repeatedly acted recklessly in the presence of the Sultan, and the rebellious soldiers deified the prince. Not surprisingly, there have also been rumors that Mahmud and Halime want to poison the Sultan. Finally, Mehmed, under pressure from Safiye, executed Prince Mahmud. With Mahmud's death, Ahmed became the oldest prince, and Mehmed even specifically appointed him heir to the throne. From there,
The prince accompanied the Sultan or the Valide Sultan everywhere. At the end of 1603, Safiye also took the boy with her to a military parade, where she actually introduced him as heir. Handan could not accompany her son, but she was certainly very happy and relieved, as Ahmed's future went in the right direction. At the same time, Handan was certainly worn out by the events, perhaps also remorseful for what had happened. At least this is what indicated by later events.
On the night of December 20th, 1603, Sultan Mehmed died suddenly, leaving his son Ahmed as his heir. Ahmed was the first sultan to ascend the throne childless, uncircumcised, without experience. The situation was very precarious. It was not known whether this young sultan would be accepted, so Mehmed's death was concealed, and all officials were asked to join the divan the next morning on behalf of the sultan. When everyone was present, Ahmed entered the room and sat on the throne, becoming a sultan without anyone being able to raise a word against him. Instead of Ahmed in the first months, two regents ruled the empire: his teacher, Mustafa Effendi, and his mother, Handan Sultan. With this, in essence, Handan became the first female regent of the empire, even if she was not alone in office. Handan knew exactly how much danger Safiye, who had protected her for years, could pose to her son. Sultan Mehmed III was hated by the soldiers for Safiye, so Handan was fearing that if Safiye remained close to power, Ahmed could fall to his father's fate as well. For this reason, on January 9th, 1604, on the advice of Handan, Ahmed exiled Safiye to the old palace. With this move, Handan started a fight with Safiye, but the great Valide could do nothing, for by then Handan had been working for a long time, with the help of Ahmed's teacher, to find all of Safiye's men in the harem and divan. With the exile of Safiye at the same time, these men and all the people loyal to Safiye were immediately deprived of their office. Out of revenge, Safiye eventually, in her helplessness, destroyed the harem with her servants as she left. There was such damage to the Valide's apartment that it was uninhabitable for a long time. Thus, it is also not certain that Handan would ever have been able to move into the apartment. In addition, almost all the inhabitants of the harem left with Safiye, so Handan remained in Topkapi Palace with only a few faithful servants. The latter may not have been a problem for the new Valide. It is not known how Handan felt after Safiye left. She was certainly relieved, for by getting rid of Safiye's men, so she paved the way for her son's reign. In order to gain the love of the soldiers, Handan and Mustafa Effendi persuaded Ahmed to envisage wars for the sake of the soldiers. Because of this, Ahmed spoke regularly about his desire to finally lead his soldiers into war. Handan became worried again soon as Ahmed, soon after his accession to the throne, along with Prince Mustafa, caught smallpox. Mustafa survived the disease faster and easier, but Ahmed lay between life and death for a long time. As a mother, who had previously lost her child to this disease, this period could have been particularly difficult. Nor was his despair eased by the murmur of the people and soldiers, worried about the Sultan's health. Eventually, Ahmed and Mustafa recovered. On the advice of Mustafa Effendi, Ahmed showed himself to the people as soon as he was able to ride. Although the Sultan looked relatively healthy, clear traces of smallpox were recognizable on his face. Maybe that's why Handan became a particularly protective mother. Ahmed wanted to spend more and more time outside the palace, hunting, walking in incognito whatever the weather was. Handan was regularly confronted with her son because of this, as she tried to prevent Ahmed from falling ill again, so she wanted to keep him in the palace as much as possible. Ahmed's long-awaited circumcision helped Handan to keep him inside for a while, though. The usual series of city ceremonies fell behind, as it would have been rather strange to celebrate a sultan's circumcision, so only a small ceremony was held inside the palace for the young sultan by Handan and Gevherhan. As he recovered, Ahmed began to receive concubines from his mother and aunts. The concubines were certainly also selected by Handan and Gevherhan. Legend has it that the relationship between Handan and one of Ahmed's concubines was particularly bad. According to legend, when Ahmed was still a prince, He began flirting with one of his mother's servants, Mapeka. When Handan realized this, she immediately punished the girl and exiled her to the old palace to save her son's life. For if it had been revealed, Sultan Mehmed could easily have executed Ahmed, because the princes were forbidden to have any relationship with the girls in the Sultan's harem. However, when Ahmed ascended the throne, he recalled Mapeka. However, it must be borne in mind that there is no concrete evidence that Mapaiker and Handan were in a bad relationship. Handan was soon relieved, as Ahmed's firstborn child, Osman, was born in November 1604. With this, Ahmed proved his ability to produce children. By now he had survived a fatal illness, constantly planning future wars, so he seemed a promising sultan, despite his young age. With the birth of more children in March 1605, Handan had already become a three-time grandmother and could have entered a calmer period of her life. Handan's health began to deteriorate in 1605. However, the exact disease is not known. Her condition worsened particularly much when one of her trusted men was executed on August 20th, 1605, by Sultan Ahmed. Sinan Pasha Olu Mehmed Pasha was the son-in-law of the former owner of Handan, Handan Sultan, which is why Handan wanted to protect the Pasha with all her might. The man's death was so shocking to the Valide that her condition began to deteriorate rapidly. Finally, Handan Sultan closed her eyes forever on November 9th, 1605, when she was only in her mid-30s. She was buried in Mehmed III's mausoleum at Hagia Sophia. During her short life, she did not have time to embark on monumental constructions and charities like his predecessors. After her death, however, plenty of food and money was distributed to those in need for Handan's spiritual salvation. At Handan's death, she didn't have to worry about the fate of her son. Ahmed's popularity continued to grow. He had at least 3 children so far. Dervish stood by him as a father figure, and Handan Sultan did not leave the young sultan alone. So in short, Ahmed had a great future despite the existing problems, so perhaps Handan could leave this world relatively calmly.